Alrighty, hello everyone. So today I want to talk on the topic of fear, because I think fear is one of the emotions and the thought loops tied to the emotion that keep people the most stuck. Yeah, fear keeps you stuck, right? And specifically with healing from a physical condition, chronic physical condition, like I'm always talking about on here, the mix between your healing journey and your awakening journey, and they're very much interlinked. But the thing with fear, right? So what I want to make this video about is fear. The voice of fear is very convincing. It's very believable. It works to wrap us up. So feel your fear, but don't believe the fear, right? But what's key is that you give yourself a space where you can explore this. So I'll give a nice example, a nice concrete example of how I've explored this recently and what a difference it can make to sit and meditate and feel into the depths of fear. And how you can see how you can get stuck in restricting your life and, getting stuck in the story of fear when you don't feel into it, right? So for me, there's been some deep stuff surfacing, right? You can call it deep shadow work, the depths of the intense emotions. And it's funny, it's humbling. It's very humbling when the stuff comes up. But at the same time, it's always taking you to a deeper level of resilience and a deeper level, a greater capacity for, your openness. You can be more and more open to things, the heavier the things are that pass through your experience, and you get broken down, you get humbled, your ego that has beliefs around what you're capable of gets kind of shown that that's not true. And it brings around a lot of surrender as well. But what was funny is I recorded a video earlier this year, and I remember titling it something like "No More Health-Related Fears." And that was true for me at the time. This is the beautiful thing about the way I try to do this is I'm not trying to string together that I'm always kind of keeping the same message. It's just sharing authentically what arises and feels true in the moment. And in that moment, that was true. That when people would ask me about reinfection or like, am I not afraid of pushing myself too hard? The truth was that there was zero fear around that. And that was good, because what it allowed me to do was to keep pushing my limits until I hit a space, which is what I've been navigating more recently, where there was deep-rooted fears still below the surface. And that's what I've been processing recently was, I think a number of things brought this stuff to the surface, right? This is the thing with things like psychedelic and deep meditation, is they can often bring you quite transcendent experiences. But those transcendent experiences then open the doorway for the deep-rooted conditions, like the deep-rooted habit patterns, the deep-rooted wounds and mental fears that are still below the surface, right? So I can see, I exposed myself to a lot recently. I did a big LSD trip about a month or so ago. Then I went on a meditation retreat, and all of this kind of started to destabilize. At the time, it led to a lot of transcendent experiences, but as is always the case, and it's helpful to understand this so you know how the process goes, that always opens the door for the heavy material, but nothing's gone wrong, right? But anyways, in my experience, it was interesting to see how fear started catching me again, right? And it had its intelligence, because part of it was for me to slow down and just redirect, pull back from certain areas of life, and just kind of overall reflect and go deep inside. but find balance, which is always key. But the way that fear was playing out, right? There was this deep underlying kind of, unease and feeling like something was off in everything that I was doing. And it felt like if I can reflect on the thoughts that were catching me, there was this background thought of, I'm on the verge of insanity, right? I'm about to like have a psychotic break, because there was so much heavy stuff that wherever I went, there was this underlying unease. And, so I had to work through this. And then one day I sat to meditate, and I was like, let's get to the root of this, right? Let's feel into, what is this unease that's here? What is this thing that's catching me, that's hanging over my experience, right? I can feel it when I'm engaging in a conversation with someone. There's this fear that I'm like on the verge of kind of losing my mind. and I went into it, and then when you give yourself the space to explore it, this is when you can see the things that you can't see when you're busy distracting all the time. So there were times when I was distracting and then engaging in the world. And in that time, it's easier to get caught up in your thoughts, right? So you don't see what is the background thought that's filtering your experience. But then when I stopped and gave myself space to explore it, this background thought came into the foreground, where I was just like, okay, what's behind this? What's behind it? Let's go into the fear. What am I afraid of? What if I just sit with this? I don't come out, and when something gets too intense, I go and distract. What if I just sit with this? What if I go deeper? A real surrender, right? Because the distraction ultimately didn't work, and there's this unease was building up so much that I knew that there was nothing to do but to go deeper into it and really sit with it and really trust and surrender. And then it was like, oh fuck. Well, it wasn't even like this massive epiphany, but it was just this kind of seeing that it was the background thought of, I'm going to go insane. And it's like, what if I just completely welcome that thought into the foreground? So it's like, okay, there's the thought, I'm going to go insane. So what? Right? What is behind that? And that's where it was like, that thought was where this whole sense of unease was kind of built on top of. It's like Angelo said it before, it's like a hall of mirrors or a house of cards, right? Where one subconscious thought with some intense emotional textures mixed in with it can build on this whole house of cards that makes you kind of navigate your reality in reflecting, like, okay, don't do that because of that thought, and then you respond with this thought, and then you create a whole set of beliefs on top of that. Whereas if you break it down and you keep going to, what am I afraid of? What's at the root of this? What's the worst thing that I can experience? What's the last place I want to look? You can really break that all down and then see that it was all built on one belief, right? Or, there can be more as you work through the process, but in each moment, there's generally one thing that's catching us. So for me, that was really powerful to just sit and meditate. And it kind of, it's been drawn out over, like, it's not like you just feel it once and then it's gone, but you can see like the flavor has been there for a while, and then you just keep going into it, right? And if you're believing the voice of fear, what you'll do is you'll run away from the experience of fear. But if I'm just like, oh, there's fear in the system, and the fear is being triggered by the thought saying, I'm going to go insane, I'm going to lose my mind. So it's like, so what if I just go insane? Like, oh, there's nothing behind it. There was just the fear, and then there was the thought that was entangled with the fear that was catching me. So, feel into your fear, go into it. What is your mind saying that's entangling the fear and making you act out of fear, right? But if you go into it, if you give yourself the space to explore it, you can process it, right? And there's nothing gone wrong. But the thing is, the gloves do come off, and the mind will pull kind of all of the fears that really trigger you. Say things like, I'm going to go insane, I'm going to lose everything, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And it's fine, right? Navigate these destabilizing times the best that you can, right? So like for me, it was a good balance to give myself to slow down in the external, to give myself enough space to process this, right? Because again, if you're too busy, you're going to probably believe the thoughts more than if you have space to look through it. You know, at the same time, if I spend too much time only doing that, you find your natural path. At the same time, for me, it was good to get out and engage with people. It gets you out of your own head, right? It can give you a different perspective on things, and then see that thought that's saying, I'm feeling like this all the time, is not actually true. It's claiming more ground than it knows, because when the thought is there, it says, oh shit, I've been feeling this all the time. But it's not actually true, right? There's periods of your day where you'll get a break from this. But then when it's there, it's so believable that it says, it's been here this whole time. And then you believe that. And then you feel like it has been. So yeah, the thing with fear is when it's in the background, it can take up a lot of space in your experience and kind of be the overarching theme. But the more that you allow yourself to just allow, right? Just allow. What am I afraid of feeling? What is the worst possible thing that my mind can produce that would scare me? And if you give that space, that's where, you build up this capacity where it's like the mind can produce whatever it wants. Whatever shadow work needs to be processed can come through, but every time it comes through initially, it's going to hit your resistance barriers, right? It's going to trigger you, because that's the reason there hasn't been capacity for it yet, because we have kind of built up these beliefs and these resistances around that amount of kind of fear is just too much for my system to handle. But you will keep on getting just more than you can handle to break down and show you that you can handle more. But when it comes, it will feel like too much. It will feel overwhelming. It will feel destabilizing. It will feel like you've lost everything. And that's the deep releasing. And the more that you can release that, and the more that you can do that, the more endless capacity you have for everything. And then you don't have a limit on what you can or can't do anymore. And then you just find your intuitive navigation of it, where sometimes maybe you do pull back and slow down, and sometimes you challenge the fear and be like, the mind is saying that this is going to be too much for me, but I'm going to go and do it in any case, and then I'll process whatever comes up. So yeah, that's my perspective and my advice on working through fear. Allow it, feel into it, get behind it, right? And then there's no problem. There really is nothing behind it except the experience of fear itself, except the thoughts themselves. But if you can see through the illusion that's catching you, then there's what there also is, right? What there also is there's a vast kind of emptiness, a vast kind of void, but it's that we're afraid to experience, right? But it's at the same time, it's boundlessness. I'm not going to talk too much about that because I don't quite have the right words to explain it, right? This is where someone like Angelo DeLulo can talk about the stuff better. But that was another thing for me to experience, was that behind it, there's an endless kind of depth to experience, but at the same time, it's endlessly empty for the mind that's trying to create something solid. It's endlessly kind of ungrounding for the mind that wants stability, right? But again, that's where you can balance it out with the human aspect. Whereas if it's just too destabilizing, then do some human stuff. This is what I've done, right? Spending time with family members and kind of working through that, realizing that navigating life as a normal human at the same time as exploring the deep stuff. It intertwines exactly as it needs to, right? Also, life will put you in the places where you need to see the things you need to. And if you're trying to fight it, then it's going to be really uncomfortable, right? So there's times where I find myself forced into specific situations, and that's very much intelligent because that's what I need to process and work through. And then on the other side of it, it can be like, oh, I can exactly see why I needed to be here at this time in my life. It's not about being isolated at this moment, it's about engaging. Or another time, if you're finding yourself isolated but you want to engage, maybe you're having to process some of the stuff that comes up through isolation, right? So just, again, navigate life as it presents itself to you. Trust what is coming up. You know, trust your intuition. You can take action. You can make changes where you need to, but trust that life is bringing you what you need to experience as you need to experience it, even if it's very challenging. And you'll navigate it, right? It will break you through barriers you need to. The you that is struggling right now might not make it through the experience because maybe what needs to happen is that layer of self and layer of identity needs to be shattered, right? That's how it's happened to me many times. It's just like, this is too much for me. And it's true, because then the me starts to, that me that felt like it was too much, that me gets replaced by, I don't know, like something on the other side where there's less of a self that has restrictions on what it can experience. And the ego gets humbled. So yeah, you can handle the fear. It can get very intense, but give yourself space to navigate it, and always allow, right? The simplest technique is always to allow. If things feel too complicated, then come back to allowing. Cool. All the best.